The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining in. We will kick off our webinar in a couple of minutes. We still have a few attendees joining in. Once again, hello everyone. My name is Mantavya and I'm your moderator for the session today. Thank you for joining us for the webinar being conducted jointly by Sitecore and edynamic. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, competing with giants, marketing Nuke for mid-market companies. And we have a whole bouquet of industry veterans lined up to talk about it. Without any further delay, let me welcome our speakers. We have Akhil Mittal, Vice President of Digital Solutions Team at edynamic. Akhil has been a multidisciplinary consultant to mid-market and enterprising companies for over a decade. He has helped industry challengers achieve business results by establishing marketing technology, digital analytics, cloud, and security solutions. Please welcome our guest speaker, Brendan Buckley, digital strategist at Sitecore. Over the past decade, he has crafted a unique process that allows for the mapping and definition of client personas, the content that motivates them, and the contextual conversions that address their unique needs. He focuses on applying this approach to middle market and SMB contextual conversions that address their unique needs. He focuses he focuses on applying this approach to middle market and SMB business challenges to drive digital transformation through the lens of measurable business objectives. And to add to a delight, we also have Greg Baxter, Senior Vice President Customer Experience Team at edynamic. Greg has spent 21 years living and breathing digital. Before edynamic, Greg spent 8 years at Sitecore leading business optimization strategies in a global and region capacity. Greg specializes in writing strategy to drive business uplift using Sitecore's marketing capability. May I also remind you that you can always type your questions and our speakers will be happy to take them during the question and answer session. Over to you, Akhil.
Many thanks, Mantavya, and hello, everyone. So last week, I met my old friend Caroline after nearly 4 or 5 years. She's one of those exceptional marketers who really know how to create demand for her brand. Earlier, she was marketing manager with a Fortune 500 company, but then she moved into a mid-market organization at the head of customer experience. Believe me if you can, her journey as a mid-market marketer is nothing short of a Hollywood blockbuster. In the upcoming slides, I have summarized the key lessons she learned through this transformational journey and detailed inputs about providing a superb customer experience by a mid-sized or an enterprising organization. Let me specify here that these real-life lessons are also valid for large enterprise marketers who are operating their division or a line of business very much similar to a mid-market organization. Hey, Brandon, your inputs will be extremely valuable as we go through these points.
Thanks, Akhil. We see situations like Caroline's all the time. She has the experience and know-how to drive demand for her new mid-market brand, but has a fraction of the resources she had access to in her previous life in the Fortune 500 world. Today, we're excited to discuss some approaches and tactics Caroline can take to maximize her digital marketing returns while working under resource and time constraints.
So what really worries Caroline? There are a lot of things to worry for a mid-market marketer, but the top three for Caroline included the first one, smaller size, which implies their brand is relatively unknown, and the biggest worry of all, a limited budget in hand.
Yeah, and with a smaller budget, focus is key. Each activity has an opportunity cost associated to it, and Caroline should strive to clearly define her business objectives and audience needs first and foremost. So they serve as a guiding light, illuminating where to focus for the highest impact.
Very true, Brandon. Moreover, the good side of being small, I think, is that you are much more agile and can execute decisions much faster. I'll give you an example. Absolute Software, a mid-sized technology firm based out of Vancouver and specialized in endpoint security and data risk management solutions, is able to challenge the biggies such as RSA, IBM in an overcrowded security solution market because of this agility in their product development. The second biggest worry is, of course, lack of resources.
Yeah, let me expand on that. It's not only a lack of tools and resources, but the fragmentation of them that can slow Caroline's climb towards digital maturity excellence. When evaluating tools and resources, we need to have empathy for Caroline and her team and consider the impact of multiple tools that achieve their individual functional goals, yet fragment the author experience, requiring Caroline and her team to access multiple systems with separate user interfaces at times requiring manual data imports and exports, which can infringe on their daily life. This is why it's important to define the personas of the marketing team, not just the end user personas, in order to properly identify the best author experience based on their unique needs. Whether a single platform experience such as Sitecore that offers web content management, analytics, and personalization all under one interface, or multiple tools that achieve a specialized marketing need or needs, unifying activities and data through integrations. Caroline and her team's preferences should drive tool and resource selection as well as governance and workflow. Empathy for their day-to-day operations is the key to success here.
Very true, very true. And last not the least, limited experience and available knowledge in-house. Building such knowledge time, I guess.
A lot of time, and considering we've all been in this industry a while, I think we know our own investments, right? So digital can span many different specialties, from SEO and user experience to analytics mapping and personalization strategies. To become an expert at everything while maintaining your day-to-day job in a mid-market organization is almost impossible. This is where engagements with full-service agencies like edynamic is essential. Whether through retainer or project engagement, agencies can bring the appropriate subject matter experts to the table to formulate digital strategy roadmaps and tactical executions that lie outside the natural skill sets available in a mid-market team.
Oh, Brandon, you really know how to keep Caroline happy despite all these worries. So yeah, let's see the key 5 do's and don'ts that a mid-market marketer can't afford to miss at all. All of us in mid-market struggle to decide how much time and effort to spend on planning versus execution. The answer is simple and effective. Use plan for shorter horizon. Set up specific KPI milestones. After execution on the plan, measure and compare status with respect to those KPIs, and then plan for the next phase.
Yeah, absolutely. Measurement strategy is key here. I've seen this with many projects. Strive to clearly define your business objectives first and foremost, and map them to clear, traceable KPIs and outcomes that show the effectiveness of any marketing endeavor. If you're deploying a personalization rule, for example, define what a successful outcome is, such as more downloads, larger cart at checkout, or increased social sharing. When you measure the effectiveness of a personalization rule, you're evaluating clear outcomes, determine if the effort was successful and should be duplicated elsewhere. Focus only on the executions that show results to maximize efforts. People don't have infinite amount of time during their work weeks to deploy things that don't show results. This allows smaller teams to effectively use their time and resources to produce the results that drive outcomes in ROI.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, analytics and reporting, one of the favorite topics for all of us as marketers. The good as well as the bad part is that we are capturing a lot of data and usually ask for more and more reports to analyze that data. While we do that, we need to keep three things in mind. We are not research students, end of the day. We are running our business. We don't want to analyze data just for the sake of it. Instead, we need to focus on measuring our KPIs. Hence, worry about getting insights that help measure your defined KPIs. Right granularity is critical. I'll give you one example. Say, measuring just the number of visits on the website will not provide any clue about your customer experience. Rather, you need to know customer engagement index, which is a view at each individual visitor rather than talking about it in aggregate number. And of course, the insights are of little use if they do not help in deciding the next course of action.
This is a team effort. So one thing that I've seen in my past is a dashboard view of all this data and how to visualize it. So knowing that there's different skill sets within a mid-market organization, whether it be sales, marketing, C-level, having a visualization and something that's easy to digest allows all those individuals to understand the information and disseminate what an outcome or success means to them. So once you have defined your measurement strategy, think about how to best present this data through visualizations. Work with your teams, gather their input, make sure that that flows into your end product to help educate and align other individuals within the team to ensure they're all on the same page and marching towards a common goal.
Yeah, I might be biased here in this, but Caroline was very vocal when I spoke to her about it. So large in-house teams build a lot of inertia and increases dependencies on deliverables. Needless to say, managing attrition for customer experience technology these days, the kind of skills required for maintaining customer experience and martech technologies is a big headache. Partners may bring speed to the execution through large teams with the desired kind of skill sets. The easiest part that I see and everyone sees is that scaling up and down on a need basis becomes fairly easy and doesn't require too much of time with that. All said and done, the entire theory, the entire philosophy we are talking here depends on the strength of the governance process we have in place. If we do not have a strong internal processes, getting a partner on board will lead to only confusions and a lot of times misalignment.
And you don't have to try to take this all on yourself. A lot of mid-market organizations try to define everything that they need to do in a one all-encompassing RFP. This isn't the only approach. You can think about engaging a partner in a monthly retainer model where you're utilizing data, what you know, or essentially what you know, to drive hypotheses, what you think, to plan and execute what you can do. And if you work with a partner with a retainer model, you can actually have a lower upfront investment and make sure that you set up that roadmap and drive both long-term strategy as well as short-term wins.
Great. In a typical B2B scenario, marketing is typically measured on metrics such as the number of marketing qualified leads or MQLs as it's termed on the other hand, sales is measured on, say, metrics like deals closed. All this leads to a lot of push and pull situation where marketing says that they have met their target of providing the desired number of MQLs, while the sales team complains about the quality of MQLs. And this tug of war keeps going on without any conclusion. The best way to address this is by having a single set of KPIs for both the teams. This set of KPIs can be as simple as the revenue generated during that time period.
Absolutely, Akil. And we mentioned this earlier. It's very key to think about your audiences internally as well as externally. So if you treat the members of the team, sales, marketing, C-level, in some cases even external, distributors, press, people who have engagement and activities within the brand. If you make sure that you aggregate all of their wants and needs and flow those into the requirements so you have empathy for the end results and everybody's on the same page, that creates a much more consistent product that's accepted by all teams across the organization.
Very well said, Brandon. Very well said. Yeah, coming to the meat of the discussion today, the main agenda, customer experience. All of us know customer experience is the single biggest playing field for mid-marketers. If we as mid-market marketers can't outdo large enterprises through an awesome customer experience, then we might go out of business as well. Our customers might leave implicit or explicit information that we marketers need to carefully listen to and action further. I'll give you some examples. Say, keywords that a prospect types in a search engine that brings her to our website. This is a very rich source of information, and we need to carefully manage this. Similarly, search functionality on our website is a very, very powerful tool if we use it wisely. On this screenshot, you see it from a mid-sized firm called K2 Intelligence. They are into investigative compliance and cyber defense services. So if you go and search, use the search function on their website, it provides an actionable view to the search by segregating the people result on one side and the different content types on the other hand, which is segregated as per the desired content. So it's very intuitive. Once you search on it, you bound to click onto something that you were trying to search for. Another example here is from a financial services firm called WP Carey. The pages a user views, the assets she downloads can collectively give a 360-degree view of that customer interest areas. For WP Carey, they are into asset management. They do a beautiful job in scoring each interaction with the customer, whether it's a page view, whether that's a download of an asset or fill up of a form. But all these interactions essentially add to a consolidated customer engagement index.
Absolutely. And implicit personalization can play into explicit personalization. So before we have that detailed information about someone, i.e. explicit, we need to basically listen to their journey and how they've engaged with the content, what channels they've come in through, what action they've shown on the website. So it's important to define your audience personas so you understand the content that addresses their unique needs and the channels which they are engaging with your brand. For implicit personalization, strive to score your content based on its relevance to each of your persona audiences. Create the content set your audiences desire as opposed to finding audiences for your content. To continue the above example of WP Carey, they have content on their site that is specifically addresses the needs of the investor persona. Sitecore specifically allows you to score content by persona and segment. So in this instance, if an anonymous user navigates to content in the investor relations section, we can use their implicit user path through the website as a trigger to show personalized content elsewhere, highlighting calls to action, relevant content, or even next steps or conversions that drive their engagement with the brand.
Great, great. So yeah, all of us know it, all of us accept it, that gone are those days when marketers used to plan campaigns for segments of customers and use carpet bombing to reach out to those segments. Now every individual customer is one segment, and hence we as marketers need to give that right attention to that granularity level. As per numerous reports, I'm sure you must have read it a lot of times, personalization definitely comes out as a mandatory arsenal in every marketing battle.
Mm-hmm. Personalization can be overwhelming as well, so it's very helpful to start with a mapping exercise. Figure out the relationships of your content, personas, and segmentation, and the channels that drive certain communications. Having this overlap allows you to present contextual one-to-one communications based on the attributes of each individual user who engages with your brand. Knowing that overlap can actually make that conversation even more granular depending on what you know implicitly or explicitly about the user.
Great, great. That brings me to my favorite topic of integrated customer experience platform, or CXP as we term it these days. So customers interact with us through multiple channels or media. That's what we see for a customer. But our marketing technology systems capture this information for each of those interactions within different systems. If not architected correctly, we might end up leaving silos of customer information. I'll explain it better. Say when the customer searches a keyword and lands up on our website, that keyword is a rich source of information about her explicit requirement. Thereafter, the customer might have read an article or say download an ebook on the site. So all this is information is essentially captured within the web content management system here. And this information, if it is passed on seamlessly to the marketing automation platform, then a personalized campaign can be targeted to that customer using that the marketing automation platform. In the case customer responds positively to those campaigns and say registers for some of the triggering points or an event, the same information from the CMS and marketing automation platform needs to be exchanged with the CRM here. In order for the sales reps, so typically in most of the B2B scenarios, it is the sales reps who finally meet out the clients and close the deals. While in an e-commerce or a B2C scenario, the situation might be a bit different. But in a B2B scenario, sales rep, for him to close the deal with this customer, a complete 360-degree view of this customer is required. And hence, all these pieces of information from CMS, marketing automation platform, and CRM needs to be leveraged by the analytics system to present a desired view to the salesperson as well as the extended team. The story doesn't end there, of course, all of us know as marketers. Post-deal closure, the information needs to be seamlessly exchanged between all these systems to further nurture and cross-sell. Create, publish,
that seems pretty complex though, right? So again, this is where a partner can be instrumental. They can work through a mapping of your data and how to best utilize it both offline and online scenarios. To expand on the sales rep example, we can pass data that summarizes all content and channels a customer is engaged with over the course of their history with the brand, as well as their last interaction. This allows the sales rep to have an informed conversation with the customer based on the desires they have explicitly shown. So essentially, you just went to our website, we know what you did and what you were trying to achieve. Now we can have that contextual conversation with you, which shows that we understand who you are, what you're trying to achieve, and really show empathy for the customer.
Very right, Brandon. Cope, all of us have heard about this term. We know it is create once, publish everywhere. But the path is it has to be enabled from day one to avoid maintaining multiple content repositories. I've seen scenarios, especially in mid-market as well as in large enterprises, where there are different content repositories for different channels, say one for website, one for mobile, and one for social. So all that maintaining of content becomes a nightmare for the marketer. And of course, single view of the customer, or what we call as the 360-degree view, is not a new concept. But implementing the same gets tricky because of the differences in different technology platforms involved. So we have spoken about this. Let us actually see how does it orchestrate, or how does it function in a real life scenario. So I'm illustrating this example of an orchestrated customer journey that we had implemented for a mid-sized professional services firm. To give you a background, this customer where we implemented it, the professional services firm I'm talking about, they are using Sitecore as their web content management system, using Salesforce as their CRM, and Eloqua as their marketing automation platform. So I'm assuming all of you have heard about all these technologies, very well known in their respective field. So the journey real begins when this user clicks on a social media campaign, which in this scenario was the Brexit scenario. and he lands onto the landing page. So what essentially happens here, an anonymous profile is created inside code. We call it the experience profile. And using the geo IP services inside code, the profile is populated with location and organization details in case all that gets available. So imagine the prospect reads the article, and an engagement score is assigned against his experience profile within Sitecore. Then similar articles are dynamically suggested to him and encouraged to ultimately subscribe to a newsletter. So that is typically a goal within the system that is assigned to him. As he subscribes, we now know a lot of details about him. So we get a better profile picture. We, from an anonymous user, he now becomes a known user, and his details, for example, name, email ID, and so on, are updated within Sitecore experience profile that we are talking about, and as well as his engagement score is updated. So that score really defines the level of engagement that individual has with our brand. So next time when he visits the website, personalized content is displayed, and this information is synced with Eloqua through an out-of-the-box connector which is built by edynamic. So what it helps is to automate a personalized email campaign through Eloqua, where the content and customer information is pushed from Sitecore. The same is extended to social media campaigns, and say the client is invited to a relevant event. If he registers for the event, a trigger is sent to the sales team. Because at the end of the day, the sales team in their scenario is the one who will meet the customer and close it. So for them, it is essential to get a 360-degree view of the customer, and all this is presented within Salesforce in their scenario, because the sales team had the access to Salesforce. And the data, the customer profile, which was present originally in Sitecore, that got integrated with Salesforce using another connector which is built by edynamic. So what happens now? The salesperson gets the entire view about this customer, what he had downloading, what kind of browsing he had done, what kind of mail campaigns, social campaigns he had responded to, and all this sort of information gives him the right arsenal to really close the deal and make the impact. So yeah, last not the least, the most critical advice from Caroline, and I thought I'll present it after this example, is that as all of us as mid-market marketeers always have a time bomb ticking on the head to deliver immediately, or we'll be asked to deliver everything now. A lot of times under this time pressure, as marketer, we choose temporary fixes and solutions, which later become a big problem. Hence, always keep a long-term roadmap in mind before selecting a solution for your immediate needs.
That's so true. This is the secret to success for any mid-market brand, balancing long-term goals and short-term successes. It's not easy, but with the help and the partnership between an agency and a mid-market organization, you can drive and excel in that digital maturity growth.
Wonderful. Now is the time for an interesting case study. Meanwhile, if you have got any questions, we'll be happy to discuss them later. So please keep typing that in the chat window. Greg, over to you.
Okay, firstly, thank you everybody for attending this webinar. I think it's been really fascinating to hear about what a mid-market marketer can do when they have the right tools. But I think historically there's a sense that this sort of technology has been restricted to the really big players, to the companies that can afford a Sitecore or a true experience platform, and that's not actually strictly true. This case study that I'm going to present to you right now is a case study that was undertaken by a very small bank. This bank was called the Queensland Teachers Mutual Bank, and they're from my home country of Australia, and they're a very small bank in one state of Australia. And obviously they're competing for teachers, accounts, and so forth. But they decided to move out of that one niche and move into a wider banking offering. And what that did was it really brought this small company up against what we would call in Australia the big four. And they are the big national banks that really own a monopoly situation inside Australia. These guys used Sitecore to power their website. But what they did initially was, rather than kind of boil the ocean and spend, a huge amount of time and money on a comprehensive personalization strategy across the board, they first launched a little micro-site. And every year, to put it in context, this company runs a competition called Staff Room for Improvement. And what they do basically is that they get school kids really to go and vote for their school. And in this case, they give their teacher an apple every day. And the school with the most apples at the end of just a 2-week period, the bank then refits the staff room for those teachers. And of course, the kids come home and they basically get their parents and their uncles and their extended family to vote for this benefit for their school. They did pop-up concerts, they made rap songs, they did all kinds of things. Even my kids came home and said, that I had to vote in this, and I was a part of the strategy of it. So I wasn't able to. But the idea here is that every day you would go to this website and you would basically click the red button there, and that would deliver a virtual apple to your school teacher. The idea behind the competition was to drive 20,000 new EDM addresses for their direct marketing campaign. And really cheekily, this company also said, we would like to raise our amount of Facebook likes, and we would like in 2 weeks to beat some of the big four. So they're talking about raising more Facebook likes than companies that are 120 years old in Australia and absolutely dominate the market. So they used personalization and the Sitecore experience platform to do this. If I voted one day, you can see that little tree of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those apples would populate with colored apples, and if you voted 10 days in a row, you got a golden apple. But of course, this wasn't all about good citizenship, even though it has that outcome. What the company really wanted to do was get a deep marketing set of who people banked with, what their mortgages will look like, and how much they were, who they insured their car with, and so forth. So they created a situation where to enter the competition, you answered some pretty serious questions. And the first of those questions were along the lines of, who are you? Obviously, you can't sell a mortgage to a 9-year-old, but you can certainly try to do that to that 9-year-old's parent. So when you started this website, basically the site figured out whether you were, a young person or an older person. If you were a young person, the messaging was all about sort of how to do entry-level banking and what banking is all about. But if you're an older person, it would pop up questions asking you who you banked with and who your mortgage was with. And so the personalization was used across iterative knowledge and a set of staggered survey questions. And throughout the 2 weeks of the game, if you like, people answered questions and they were given bonus apples. Nobody throughout the 2 weeks actually saw the extent really of how many questions they were answering. And when a user or when a player entered in that they banked with, say, brand X or big bank X, the next time they went back to QTMB's website, if their mortgage rate was lower than that bank, and they typically were, it would have, this is the rate you're paying now, this is the rate that we can offer you, with a huge call to action to switch. So they made this information actionable from the beginning of this competition. They also did some really clever things around bonuses, awarding extra apples to deliver that kind of information. They also had that requirement that they wanted to basically drive a social presence that was really stronger. And don't forget, this company runs this every year, so they're measuring results in the quarter after in terms of absolute sales definitively. So you can see there an example of kind of 2 different messages on the homepage that were driven based on the questions and the outcomes of you playing this kind of game. But one of the really key parts to this was this concept of using social power. So Sitecore is able to, of course, to publish to Facebook internally, so you have governance over messaging and all of that good stuff. And these guys basically had a wall created on Facebook around the game for the 2 weeks, and at a random time during the day, between, I think it was sort of 4 in the afternoon and 9 at night, so kids could be involved, a golden apple or an apple appeared on that page. And if the user clicked on that and went back to the website to vote during that happy hour, if you like, then they were awarded extra apples to do that. And of course, the kids stood a better chance of having, the staff room improvement for their teachers. So people hung out on Facebook for, a very long period of time over the period of 2 weeks, being constantly exposed to brand messaging and waiting for that magical, turbo apple to appear. So there were a lot of channels functioning throughout this. So there's website personalization, there was microsite personalization, there was email marketing, and there was social personalization that was all driven from one platform. And I'm going to very quickly show the results to you of this campaign, because it was perhaps one of the most interesting and exciting campaigns I'd really ever seen in my time at Sitecore. So during the quarter after this campaign, they attributed 60% of their growth in sales to this campaign as compared to last year. So that's a huge number. We know that personalization as an industry kind of average generally drives around about 90% uplift in sales. I've been privileged to be was privileged to be a part of Sitecore for 8 years, and I saw numbers from 60 to 600% increases in conversions across websites. Instead of the 20,000 new EDM names, because the virality of the game and the ease of use and the social component, they doubled that. So they got 40,000 players over this weekend, and because they staggered and used personalization to target very carefully the questions that they asked people, out of those 40,000 users, fully 37,000 completed 100% those surveys. So if you sit back and think about that, it's an absolute treasure trove of marketing data for the people, for the marketers inside QTMB. 37,000 people telling them who they bank with, what their mortgage is, who their car insurance is with, and all of that kind of information. They did achieve, really happily, 1.75 million Facebook votes and 1.25 million Facebook hits. And in 2 weeks, over a clever campaign that cost $60,000 to drive, they had those incredible business outcomes, and they ended up with more likes than at least one of the major banks. From an SMB perspective, this is a true David versus Goliath story. These guys did this incredibly well. They did it in 2 weeks, and when I say they, I'm going to take a step back from that statement now and say the great majority of this work was done by one person. So once the microsite and the personalization on the website was instrumented by the digital agency, one guy inside Queensland Teachers Mutual Bank largely drove this. And I think anybody would sit back and be happy to take those kind of results to their board for what was a $60,000 investment. So that's one story of how an SMB can really take advantage of a tool like Sitecore and be able to measure and prove that they've made an absolute financial impact to the bottom line of the business. And that is the mandate of marketers today. So that's a true story. You can find it on, you can find the guy Sean on YouTube talking about it. There is a case study floating around on Sitecore.net, so you can actually check that one out. It's a tremendous story, and one that I was really fascinated to watch happening in progress. So that's the case study there. There's a couple of quotes here. The Chief Marketing Officer, Chris Moses, saying with Sitecore we can engage our customers in as personal a conversation as they'd have in a branch. And we all know what's happening in branches in banks. People go to their branch almost at the point of they have to at this point in time, compared to the amount of times they'll use online banking. Branch traffic and footfall is dying tremendously. So whether they're using QTMB's main website or their mobile site or through social media, they're actually talking to customers. And they're getting interactions 26 times a fortnight and not sort of once every 3 months when somebody comes into a branch. Sean Riley is a name worth Googling. After this, you can see Sean talking about this. He says that Sitecore gave QTMB the power to present the banking information a customer really cares about without them having to even think about it. And that's absolutely key. One of the fantastic outcomes of personalization, quite apart from the capturing of the user data and advanced and superior business outcomes, is it's a frictionless service of information to the customer. And when that happens, it's not really sales. It's a service to those customers. So let's wait for my screen to refresh here. We'll just finish up here very quickly with a short couple of seconds on edynamic. We're a digital marketing agency really focused on customer engagement. We think of ourselves as technical marketers, and in this era we absolutely should. We operate across 500 countries. We have around 350 plus employees. We're headquartered in New York City. We really think of ourselves as an inch wide and a mile deep in terms of digital. We think very much about, I guess, the trinity of systems, and that is, an experienced platform like Sitecore operating in symphony with an outbound tool or a marketing automation tool or Sitecore's own capability and a CRM. We think that really allows an SMB marketer who's small and nimble to drive incredible outcomes. And here's the thing, this is not necessarily about a mountain of data. Everyone talks about big data. There's so much you can do with little data when you focus on that. What is the online experience? How can we send the most relevant email marketing out? And how can we capture the outcomes of that in a CRM? So we do that kind of work with people like Amex. We do that kind of work with people like WP Carey and so forth. We've been a gold partner since 2003. I'm not going to say it, but we're going to have some very good news for us around Symposium very soon, around that status. We've delivered over 200 Sitecore projects. We have 150 odd trained Sitecore resources. And I'm really proud to say even our CEO is a Sitecore strategy MVP. So customer experience is really baked into our DNA as a company. We've won a great deal of awards. We won the WMA award this year for outstanding achievement for a company called Ida Bailey, a professional services organization. So we continue to rack up awards, which is awesome. And one of the reasons that we do that is that we recognize that this is a marketing ecosystem and that you can go to a single platform tool like Sitecore and do a great deal of this stuff. Not everybody needs an Eloqua, and certainly SMBs maybe not, but they certainly still need the capability to have a website that works in symphony and in parallel with some level of email marketing. And of course, Sitecore offers all of that in one integrated experience. But we have built out a whole raft of connectors, if you like, to the wider marketing ecosystem. So Akil, I don't know if you want to add to any more of that. Brendan, I believe we've got questions that we need to answer.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a few questions.
So further, we'll be moving ahead for the question and answer session. We have got a bunch of questions. So the first question is, what is a typical web conversion rate? Can you speak to how investment in digital strategy can increase conversion rates?
Yeah, I think Greg, you hit on this with your case study, right? So typical conversion rate across the web, if you're getting 1 or 2%, believe it or not, those are decent numbers. So some of those personalization rules that were derived from the strategy that edynamic came up with are able to increase those. We heard numbers like 9% to 600%. And when you think about outcomes that are attached to ROI, especially their 60% increase in sales, those are real numbers. Those are adding to the bottom line. And if you're able to nudge through contextual communications that 2% up even a little tick here or there, you're starting to see gains and gains and gains. And before you know it, those snowball. And actually the screen that we're looking at here, it's using all of these things in conjunction to make sure that that digital roadmap is clicking on all cylinders and you're increasing conversions over time, both short-term and long-term based on the roadmap and the vision.
I'd add to that just really quickly as well. When Akil started this presentation, he pointed out quite rightly that when somebody does something like clicks on an advert or comes in on Google AdWord that tools like Sitecore can read, they're really telling you their intent. And when you look at the average bounce rate, let alone the conversion rate for a website, it's something like 50%. Imagine a business that you owned, say a restaurant or something, and 50% of the people who walked in the door turned on their heel and walked out. You would radically do something about that. And being able to align campaign intent with the first thing somebody sees on the homepage through personalization is a super powerful way to do that. And it's a small thing to do. It's a no-brainer, and it's something that I recommend every time I have a professional engagement around Sitecore. Align your major campaigns with the first thing people see when they hit the website. So if you're an insurance company or even let's say a small wine merchant or something like that, if somebody searches for red wine, show red wine when they hit the website. Like, it's real simple stuff.
Yeah. And I think you've hit upon this throughout both case studies and the presentation. You're really mapping not just metrics, like a exit rate in a vacuum doesn't mean anything, but you're mapping that to KPIs and outcomes and seeing holistically what all this data means for the brand over time. So it's not just looking at little pieces of data, it's understanding the broad breadth of that data and how you can action upon it.
Yeah.
So the other question is, how do I balance quick wins and long-term goals to ensure we do not slow to a halt at the expense of the long-term roadmap?
Aha, this is one I hear all of the time. And this conversation really comes down to two things. Nobody, not even big corporates, can afford to boil the ocean, let alone SMBs who find it difficult to get away from the nuts and bolts of actually doing business and generating revenue. So there's plenty of ways to do this. Start with just considering personalizing just the homepage, and start with just personalizing one or two campaigns like we talked about a few moments ago, or consider just one profile, just the one profile that drives a large percent of your revenue, and sit down and work out what that particular customer type needs to see, what their journey looks like. You will know this is not complex stuff, and then sit down and use Sitecore's personalization and rule editor and its ability to measure engagement to craft that kind of path and a few calls to action that will drive people to conversion points. So those are not big undertakings. I've seen Sitecore projects or personalization projects roll down in as little as 2 weeks that have driven ROI. So you don't have to sit back and think, oh, I have to map every customer journey and I have to do all these personas and I have to create rafts of analytics. That's probably the best way to tie yourself in knots. I think when large businesses across the world manage themselves with a balanced scorecard of no more than 7 or 8 analytics, that we should look at analytics for this kind of endeavor in much the same way. Whenever I'm doing an engagement with any business, the key thing that I try to do is bring back the amount of analytics we're measuring to the actionable and workable few. That's a really big take home out of this. Measure the things that people click on that drive revenue for your business, and start there.
Yep. I always talk about this as utilizing personalization wins as currency internally. So take GeoIP rules, which are relatively easy. If I log in from Boston or LA, if the way I talk to my end consumers is different, present that personalization rule, track the impact, and then if that works and you show those conversion rate increases, you go back to your larger team, both sales and C-level, and say, you know what, this has shown gains for us. Let's do something a little more aggressive here that's tied to our roadmap. Implicit personalization based off of paths and analyzing that, where they came from in terms of AdWord campaigns or external email campaigns. You can get more and more complex, but starting at the kind of the crawl and the crawl, walk, run level, allows you to show the wins internally and then use those as currency to do bigger and better things down the line.
Absolutely correct.
Wonderful. Pantavya, any further questions?
We'll be taking this as our last question. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but definitely you'll be receiving the answers to your queries over your registered email. The final question is, how can I articulate the cost versus value of digital transformation to my peers who are reluctant to make the investment?
I can take a first stab at that. I mean, we talked about 60% increase in sales for Greg's example, the case study. If you can articulate what the outcomes mean in terms of revenue, outcomes, et cetera, and put a dollar amount on that, you reverse engineer it. So even when you look at Sitecore, per 1,000 unique visitors, that costs about $24 when you look at our licensing model to have that conversation. So is it worth $24 to have a contextual one-on-one conversation with your consumers? Yes, I would say yes. But it's all about mapping that to your ROI. What makes sense to you, and can you basically justify that investment from the gains that you're looking to trigger down the line?
I'd also add to that and say, there is a time and place where it is actually really good to bring in my old division from Sitecore Business Optimization Strategies, or an agency like edynamic. We're very skilled at making the return on investment real and measurable to executive level staff. It's a key thing that we see over and over and over again, and it's one of the things that we hear it is a problem. That is getting executive buy-in across the board to do this. So I know from my time at Sitecore, there is a Sitecore return on investment calculator that can be employed. And we generally have access to case studies across most verticals that will be similar to yours. And we certainly don't always work with, the juggernauts of the planet. We do plenty of mid-market work. So we would be happy to come in and help try and make that case, I would imagine, with your executive. And I don't really imagine we do it all of the time.
So I think
that was the final question, yeah?
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate your time and hope to see you again on one of our upcoming webinars. Thank you once again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.